That brings us to item number 18 under our action agenda. Our actions as necessary or appropriate on matters discussed in executive session. We had one item, 3A, selected employment items. Do I have a motion? Mr. Cates.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we that we approve selected employment items, Exhibit A, as presented.
Do we have a second? Ms. Hutchison seconds. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. And that brings us to our first reading approval, first reading of the 2019-20 capital budget, and I'll entertain a motion and a second, and then probably have a presentation if necessary, but we have a motion. Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we give first reading approval of the 2019-2020 capital budget as shown in Exhibit H.
Do we have a second? Mr. Cates, second. Any discussion? See none. Mr. Lovelace.
Yeah, I would like to see under the technology plan, I mentioned this before, that we break that down and have it per school like we used to do. You know, we just got a lump sum of money there that shows up under the technology plan, and I want to make sure there's equitable distribution to the schools that need it, and see where that is. You know, that's, you know, we may have some 8-year-old computers in one school and some brand new ones in another, and I'd like to know where our focus is on that. And I think that could be easily done. I don't think that's a big ask.
Mr. Richardson, would you like to address that question?
Well, excuse me. I didn't bring an itemized list tonight. We did discuss it, but just so you know that, you know, we have replaced our technology all across the board so that we've got everybody using the same type of equipment. We don't necessarily replace them based upon schools any longer. We do it based upon the older models across the district. So we try to keep everybody fairly even. So we're trying to, and I think we do a pretty good job of being equitable across the board. Now, if the board would like for me to bring something back at a later date to show you what we're doing, I'll be glad to do that.
Mr. Lovelace, with that satisfied? If you
Yes, sir.
saw what had been done historically and what was planned to be done with this amount of money.
Yes, sir. That's correct. I just had
Okay.
seen some prior capital budgets, and in those, they had it designated for which, I didn't mean which school. What I meant was which variety of product that we were going to try to, you know,
What-
serve.
I understand. I mean, obviously, a big part of our focus is on infrastructure across the district. On an annual basis, we're replacing 6th grade and 9th grade Chromebooks for all students.
That's great.
In addition, you know, you've got teachers with multiple devices and 2 to 3 devices depending on the teacher. We're trying to keep all of those up to date as possible on an annual basis. And there's a lot of other things that we're doing that, quite frankly, aren't coming to my head right now that I'd be glad to try to give you some more information at the next board meeting,
Okay.
or prior to that, actually.
Thank you.
That'd be great. Any other questions? Ms. Hutchison.
I have a few. I'm wondering, Mr. Richardson, when we're talking about the school identified needs, how does that total amount compare to previous years? I can't remember.
It's in line, quite honestly. It's based upon how, that one sort of is what's left after we know all these other budgets that we have. That's the amount that's left over typically. We try to set aside $500,000 on an annual basis for any contingencies. At the end of the year, if we don't have any of the, you know, contingencies that use up that $500,000, obviously that goes towards some of these school identified needs. Mr. Lovelace mentioned showing list on a per school basis in prior capital budgets. We try not to do that anymore because what that turned out to be was a big wish list, but we do have a mechanism now, so all during the year that as there are some needs identified in schools, that they're able to give us that information, and depending on whether or not it's something that can wait or not, you know, we go ahead and try to do as much as possible on an annual basis. But to answer your question, how does that compare? It's been about the same amount, but it varies just because of the amount of money we have available.
Right, right.
Ms.
I
Hutchinson?
have another question. I know last week, Mr. Carlin had talked about the renovations at Irmo with regards to the training room and the arts room and all that moving. Is that included in this budget, or where does that come from?
Well, a big portion of the project was approved last
Okay.
year in the capital budget, and this is just because the scope changed so much, it basically doubled our cost, so you're seeing the additional needs in this year's budget. We had approximately, it was a little more, I don't recall the exact amount, a little over $600,000, I think, budgeted last year.
Yes, sir. It was about around $600,000 for each project, the softball area and also the training room.
Right, and so then now with the additional needs of moving the art room, doing the training room, there were some additional things we're doing on the softball fields I think we hadn't initially planned for. It's
We-
basically about doubled our cost.
We did.
Okay. And Mr. Carlin, I'm so glad you're standing up there.
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed that, and you might guess what I'm going to ask you. Irmo High School replaced the HVAC. Is that actually moving the units that are on top of the roof? So they would be moved elsewhere, or is this a time when we could put one of those screens?
The project in its current state does not include moving any of that new equipment.
Okay.
It's to address outdated equipment that is in, if you're facing the front of what we call the West Wing, kind of the right side building, off the front entrance.
I've seen those.
Yes, ma'am.
So this really, and I know that it's expensive to put these screens in, but this is not the time. It wouldn't be way too costly to add the screen, the privacy screen.
It would be difficult to screen the equipment that's there now without making it an eyesore in and of itself. Now, something more expansive for the entire building might be something different, but that would be much more substantial.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have another question.
Mr. Lovelace?
The process whereby we use this capital budgeting model that you have, you know, there's other schools in here that aren't, a lot of other schools that are not on here.
Yes, sir.
Is there an overall capital budget that this is for 5 years into the future, or 4 years into this year and 4 years in the future? Is there an overall process and that we can get other things that may need to be done and ranked highly in that process during the 4 years?
Well, the overall intent of this particular budget, Mr. Lovelace, is to address the big rock projects that we have in our infrastructure, which tend to largely just include HVAC and roofs. Now, there are some other things we introduce occasionally if there's a specific need, but predominantly it's roofs and HVAC systems. And we take a 20-year look, and so this is just a sliver of that. You know, we feel like we can get pretty close to accurate within 5 years. Anything outside of 5 years, we know we're guessing.
Yeah.
But both those systems, you know, have shelf lives, if it's a roof, of about 20 to 25 years. If it's
Right.
HVAC, and you know this, being
Yeah.
in the business.
Yeah.
15 years to 20 for air-cooled equipment and 20 to 25 for water source systems. So that kind of gauges, you know, where we're lining those up in this current year and then the years out from there.
Okay, so anything else that would come out, that we'd have, would have to come out of the contingency allowance or underspending for many of these line items you had on here?
Yes,
that you budgeted. Okay, so, and then we have, I'd see a total of $10 million in there, so, you know, in year 5, we're gonna have, you know, inflation adjusted, it's gonna be $9,600,000 or something like that, so.
It's certainly
you know.
not buying what it used to.
Yeah, so, I mean, but I asked you that before, but that magic number of $10 million is just what we do? Or is that just the way we do things, or is that another?
I think Mr. Richardson
I mean, I don't-
might want to
you know.
say something about that.
We did $10 million because that's been about the amount that we've been able to get on an annual basis. And like I said, the last 2-3 years, we actually have not received exactly $10 million.
Right, right.
So, but that's why we budget $10 million, because it's in the ballpark of what we can expect.
If we had say if you had a line item on here and you exceed that line item during that year, and it exceeds the contingency there, what do we do? Do we just drop something off the list?
We would have, luckily, knock on wood, we haven't been in that situation, but we would definitely have to make a
I
decision.
mean, we would just move that item to next year's list?
If
And that would be the head priority?
If that happened, I think we'd have to look at doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hammond?
I was just thinking, since we're 5 years out, you know, and you do plan ahead because you anticipate the HV systems in all our schools have a certain life, do we bid that, knowing that's going to be an expense every year, do we shop around with different vendors, or do we get a deal from one person? And, I mean, I'm just thinking that's a lot of, I mean, that's secured business. I wondered how we go about getting it bidded.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we're asking you to approve this current year. And the
So you-
years 2 through 4
You're not sure
are
what it
just
would cost?
projections on
Okay.
what we anticipate bringing to you in those out years. So we're just basically bidding this work that in the 1920 calendar year right now.
But Ms. Hammond, to answer your question, it is bid. So it's
Each
not,
year,
we
year to
don't.
year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Mr. Cates?
Mr. Richardson, I want to clarify that it's bid project by project. I mean, I guess the answer is we follow the state procurement code and
Absolutely.
our district's procurement code, and as required, those projects are bid
Yes, sir.
prior to work commencing and.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Carlin, I wanted to see if you can help, see if my memory's right on this. Wasn't there an effort, or isn't there an effort, to try to have some consistency as far as the type of units and so forth? Because it seems to me, I remember a few years ago, we had a whole variety in our many sites of schools that, for our own maintenance, was causing us problems to keep up. Isn't there an effort to keep a consistent, at least 2 or 3, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 types, that we can somewhat maintain ourselves? I know we have to have a lot of help with that maintenance issue, but isn't that also part of our effort to keep a consistent model there?
Yes, and there's different philosophies on all these type systems, what you do and what you don't do. I'm extremely conservative, and so I don't ever want to be on the cutting edge of anything that's going on right now. In my opinion, we have at least a couple of locations where we tried some cutting edge during the bond referendum. I'm for simple systems that are proven, cost-effective, and we can readily get maintenance assistance in the local economy to work on our systems. So yes. Now, we don't want to limit competition when it comes to manufacturers and things like that. We want to keep it in a manageable box, but we also want to have enough competition out there where we're not, making it too advantageous for any one vendor.
And my only background is as a homeowner, but obviously, the last thing you want to hear when you've got an issue with heating and air system is, well, that was a little different. It's going to take 3 weeks to get that part. You'd rather hear that it's on the shelf somewhere, or at least within a reasonable amount of time that you can get it. And with our schools, we can't afford to have these systems go down. So I guess lessons we've all learned through building or bidding is that the lowest price is not always the best price for us. So I would.
We're looking for best value.
Best value, long-term, the replacement part here or there is also a big piece of that factor too.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the capital budget? Well, seeing none, I would entertain, we've already had a motion. All we need to just vote. All those in favor of approving this capital budget, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Carlin and Mr. Richardson. That brings us to item number 20, which is our 2019-2020 board meeting schedule, shown in Exhibit I. Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we approve the 2019-2020 meeting schedule as shown in Exhibit I.
We have a second. Mr. Cates seconds. Any discussion? Mr. Cates.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend the calendar as posted in our packet, the September 23rd, February 24th, and May 18th. So that's September 23rd, 2019, February 24th, 2020, and May 18, 2020. I'd like to amend the calendar to have those meetings located at the district office.
Okay. Do you have any background you'd like to share with us on that, Mr. Cates?
Yes, sir, if you'd like,
Okay.
I was waiting to
Oh, we
see if
need
it
a
received a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll
Have a second? I'm sorry.
I'd like to speak, may I speak to the amendment?
Yes, yes.
We recognize the hard work that goes into hosting us, and we are very grateful and appreciative. After we're done tonight, we know that there's a lot of staff that's going to have to hang back and set up for breakfast in the morning, and this is an effort to minimize the impact on our school staffs who are doing an outstanding job, especially for that September and February meeting. The May meeting, the thought behind that is during our testing window, and I believe it'd be inappropriate to ask a school to host a board meeting during our testing window. I feel like it would be better served to have that meeting at the district office. So that's the rationale for my amendment.
Okay, great. And Ms. Hammond?
I think it's a great idea. I would think over the years, I've had different staff members, tell me how much work does go into it. In no way was it complaining, but I ask, and I know when they're already at the district office, everything's there, and especially if we ask for something, sometimes they can run and make a copy right there. So I think it is very considerate for us to do this.
Good comments. Any other comments? See none, then this vote will be on the amendment offered by Mr. Cates. And all those in favor of the amendment to change those meetings of September 23rd, February 24th, and May 18th to the district office for the meeting rather than where they're designated on this list, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. That brings us back to our original motion, which is the approval of the 2019-2020 board meeting schedule as amended this time. So any further discussion on the original motion? See none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That concludes our action agenda, and that brings us to our discussion agenda,